morning, y'all, and welcome back to another new video. Today I'm starting a new mini series on this channel. It's going to be 4 parts, one on each of the 4 lives of the Marauders. So we're going to look in depth at their life and sort of the role they played in this series. And before we jump in, just a reminder to like and subscribe and hit the bell notification button, and check out my link tree down below for all the other places you can find me. Without further ado, we can jump into the video. So we are starting with James Potter this week, and James Potter was born on March 27th, 1960. He is a pureblood wizard who was born into a wealthy wizarding family, and he actually may have been related to the Blacks, but we're not sure. There is a Potter on the Black family tree, but it's never 100% confirmed if this is the same Potter. But if it is, it would be interesting because it would have made Harry and Ginny cousins, some degree removed, but nonetheless cousins, which is sort of interesting. So his parents were definitely a bit older when they had him, and they died sometime in the late 70s or early 80s, so that only would have been his late teenage years. So yeah, they were probably a little bit older when they had him, or maybe they died from some unknown cause, but it is said that they died of natural causes, so it's likely that they were just older. And James was very spoiled as a kid because they were kind of a wealthy family, and this probably played a role in, his somewhat obnoxious behavior as a teenager. And I just want to preface that I know any conversation with the Marauders is going to be a little bit biased, because I know people have very mixed feelings about the Marauders and about Snape and about the relationship between the two of them. And I'm just going to be presenting it factually, kind of based off the descriptions of the people in the series itself. And if you take issue with that, that's fine. Everyone can have their own opinion, but just know that, if I say James was obnoxious as a teenager, well, that's because he was described that way in the book. And if you feel like his behavior wasn't obnoxious, that's totally fine. But yeah, so I'm not really, into debating. I'm just kind of presenting it factually. And so he did start Hogwarts in 1971 and was sorted into Gryffindor House. And immediately he became friends with Peter, Remus, and Sirius, and they started calling themselves the Marauders. And James was definitely clever, but also a little bit mischievous. Think sort of like a class clown type of kid, but he did really have a good brain in his head or whatever. He was a smart kid. And he also played Chaser for the Gryffindor team, at least in the books. In the movie, he was shown to be playing Seeker. So I kind of just go by the books, but yeah, so Chaser, Seeker. And he was very self-confident, even bordering on being a bit obnoxious. And he was potentially a bit of a bully. And before people jump in and say, oh no, it was a rivalry and Snape was a bully too or whatever, I'm not saying I disagree, but it is also stated that James bullied more people than just Snape. So I would kind of stick by saying that he was a bully. And throughout his time at Hogwarts, he and Snape were rivals. And according to Remus and Sirius, this was because Snape was jealous of James and his Quidditch talent and his popularity. But however, it was later revealed that James and Sirius insulted and bullied Snape from the moment that they first met him on the Hogwarts Express. So whether Snape, actually was jealous, or if it was because they immediately made fun of him, or for whatever reason, though, we hear mixed accounts in the story of why they hated each other. But either way, they did. And so Snape really resented James and would often try to find reasons to get him in trouble and get him expelled. And at some point in his school years, James and the other 3 also did create the Marauders map. We're not ever exactly told when they did this. So James would also hex Snape, even using some of the hexes that Snape had invented himself against him, which is kind of embarrassing for Snape, I think. And James also had a huge crush on Lily Evans, and he would really chase after her, and at first she just really didn't like him. She thought he was a bully. Lily and Snape were childhood friends. They'd kind of lived near each other, and this probably likely further sparked James' dislike of Snape. It's possible even that James was jealous of Snape for being close to Lily. And in their 5th year, Lily disliked James so much that she said she'd rather go out with the giant squid than him. So she really did not like James. And though James was not all bad by any means. So when he found out that Remus was a werewolf, he spent 3 years learning to become an Animagi, along with the other 2 Marauders did as well, so that he could accompany Remus on his monthly transformations. So he definitely was a good and loyal friend. And he was a stag. That was his Animagi, and they finally completed it in their 5th year. And because of this, he got the nickname Prongs. And so they would all disappear into the Shrieking Shack every month with Remus because he was doing his transformations there. And Snape kind of noticed them going into the Shrieking Shack, and he wanted to know where Remus went every month. and he did see them going into the Shrieking Shack with Madame Pomfrey one time, and he wanted to follow. And one of the other guys had actually told him how to get past the Whomping Willow, and so he did follow them in, but he didn't know that Remus was going to be in werewolf form in there. And James actually pulled him back at the last second, really saving his life basically, because he would have been attacked by a werewolf, which potentially could have killed him. And this was definitely like an awkward kind of thing for them. But it actually seems that it kind of caused a change in James' behavior. I think he realized, okay, we were pranking this guy we don't like, but we actually could have gotten him killed. And I think that's sort of a bit of a wake-up call, because he definitely seemed to show a change in behavior after this and be more mature. And it definitely left Snape feeling confused. And Snape kind of thought James only did it to get out of trouble, like that if James had just let him die and had known, like, he would have gotten expelled. He didn't really think that James actually did it out of like the kindness of his heart. And I think he also resented being in his debt. So kind of switching away from their relationship, at 16, Sirius moved in with James so he could escape his terrible family situation, which I'll talk more about when we do Sirius's segment of this series. And Sirius was treated like a member of their family by James and his parents. They were basically like brothers to each other. And if James actually is related to the Blacks, that would have made him and Sirius cousins, which is kind of cute. And so James had made a lot of changes and growth, and by his 7th year, he had really changed a lot. I mean, he was even appointed head boy after not having been a prefect, which is kind of rare. Head boys don't have to have been prefects, but they usually are, so it really shows that he made a huge turnaround. And Lily definitely noticed these changes too, and so she finally decided that she would give him a chance, and they did start to date, and they fell in love. And James, he stopped texting random people, but he would still occasionally hex Snape, so I don't know. But I guess this was like kind of okay because they would hex each other, so I guess it was like a little different than how he would just like how James would just hex like random people. So when they're 18, they graduate, and he and Lily get married, and Sirius was the best man at their wedding, and James and the others joined the Order of the Phoenix. And James and Lily defied Voldemort 3 times over the next 3 years, between 1997 and 1980. So like when he was pursuing them, he escaped them. And James had inherited a huge fortune when his parents died, so he didn't have to work and was able to support his family as well as Remus, who was unemployable due to his status as a werewolf. So he had a lot of money, which interestingly kind of makes Harry's Aunt Marge's dig at them being unemployed true. They were unemployed because they'd inherited a lot of money. And on July 31st, 1980, his son Harry was born. And shortly after this, Dumbledore did come to James and tell them that he was in great danger, him and his family, and that Harry was Voldemort's target due to a prophecy, which if you want to hear more about the prophecy, I've done a YouTube video on it that you could probably scroll back and find. And so in October of 1981, they go into hiding in Godric's Hollow under the Fidelius Charm, which I've also talked about that in the past, but sort of just a refresher. The Fidelius Charm is a very strong hiding charm, but one of the like catches of it is there has to be a secret keeper that knows where you're hidden, and as long as they keep the secret, you stay hidden, but if they give the secret up, your location becomes known. Dumbledore offered to be the Potter's secret keeper, but James insisted that Sirius be their secret keeper because James felt that Sirius would die before he ever gave them up. And so yes, so Sirius is to be their secret keeper, but Sirius actually convinces them to switch it to be Peter Pettigrew because Sirius felt that he was too obvious. They were best friends, he'd been the best man at his wedding, he'd just recently become Harry's godfather. So they decide to switch it to Peter while Sirius is the decoy. And no one but the 4 of them knew of the switch. So only Peter, James, Lily, and Sirius knew of the switch. So even Remus and even Dumbledore didn't know about this. And obviously we know that Peter betrays them. And so on October 31st, 1981, Voldemort arrives at Godric's Hollow, and James tells Lily to take Harry and run, and basically he tries to stand up for Voldemort, but he didn't have his wand, and he didn't have his invisibility cloak because Dumbledore had actually had it, and so he really stood no chance and was killed. And yeah, that's basically his life, and we see him post-mortem in several memories, as well as in 1991 in the Mirror of Erised, and in 1995 during Priori Incantatem, and in 1998 we see James with the Resurrection Stone when he tells Harry he's very proud of him and would stay with him until the very end. And that is pretty much his life. And so, yes, that is James Potter's life. That was the role that he played in the series. And next I'm going to do Peter Pettigrew, so definitely come back in a few days to hear all about Peter Pettigrew's life. I actually think it's quite interesting. And so until next time, bye y'all.